McKinney-Vento Homeless Act, which is, so that's
Yeah.
like the main kind of homeless bill that Congress has really passed. And it's probably like any sort of homeless support bill is tied to the McKinney-Vento Act. And so it was passed originally, that act was passed in the 60s, and then every 5 years Congress has to renew it. And so this was an amendment in that renewal process.
Okay. CAPTA was?
Yeah.
Saying?
And so, yeah, it was put on in, because it was originally like, so I pulled it up again here. So there's originally like this long bill, the Child Abuse Prevention, Treatment, and Adoption Reform Act of 78, but then they kept amending it. And then, let's see, and then it was 2010? Wait, sorry, I had it. Yeah, 2010 is when they tied it to McKinney-Vento.
Okay.
And then, because, so McKinney-Vento gets ongoing funding, and my guess is that's why, just kind of knowing how. So like, say if you're a member of Congress, like a representative or a senator, McKinney-Vento always kind of gets a flat budget, and kind of depending on which party controls Congress, they can increase or kind of keep that budget the same. But like, if you want to throw something in there that will get regular funding, my guess is that's why they did this, would be my opinion.
Okay. So that makes sense for funding purposes.
Yeah. Because probably the program wasn't funded well enough before, but but you could do more research to see if, like, I don't know, I didn't look this part up, if like advocates say that it's funded well enough.
Okay.
So that's what you might want to look into and see just kind of what like advocates for like child abuse that work specifically on that say.
Okay. So as far as CAPTA goes and affecting VOA, is that mainly like, are you mainly going to be talking about like HYRC and the library team?
Yeah, so it would encompass, sorry, I'm getting, one second. Like it would affect, so Cornerstone, because they have the domestic violence program for treatment, and then they have the daycare program. And then, YRC, really any homeless outreach, because we're under that and we use the NASW Code of Ethics, and so we have to report any child abuse, and that's what this would be under now.
Okay.
So that's where if we witness something, we need to report it to police or like the CPS, DCFS, whatever variation.
Okay. So I'm assuming I probably know a lot of the scope of like VOA, but in terms of like the relationship of that and the policy, like what would you say is that relationship?
Like how the policy affects VOA?
I think that's what she's saying. A lot of her like instructions or like what she's asking for is kind of confusing, but
okay.
Yeah, it's like she asked for the review and scope and review the scope and purpose of the policy, the scope of the agency of the program, and the relationship between the two.
Okay. Well, I mean, I certainly like probably affects YRC the most, because a pretty big chunk of the kids that go in there are under 18, and so they kind of by default need to contact DCFS anytime that occurs, and then they need to report any signs of abuse, or if the child reports any signs of abuse, so that would be emotional, physical, sexual, psychological. Yeah. So any of those. Sorry?
And neglect.
Yeah.
I don't know what that would really constitute as for those kids being that old.
Yeah. They theoretically would be covered, but that's, I mean, maybe the free range parenting bill affects that.
That's so, I just still can't get over that bill, but okay.
And then there's like weird city ordinances. I mean, always the federal and state statutes will trump those, but Bruce, go lay down. But like, so Salt Lake has an ordinance, so like a city law that kids above the age of, I think it's 11, it's like 10 or 11, I think, can kind of be on their own for like certain parts of the day. And so that means like the police won't care if they're like unattended for 4 hours or something.
Yeah, I tried to find that for my last paper and I couldn't find that. But I remember you had said like something about that when they turn a certain age, but I never actually found it. But,
yeah. And that's from the police, and so it's probably some way old ordinance from the 1800s. So that's probably why you have a hard time finding it.
Okay. So identify and discuss the impact that this relationship has on the agency's functioning at the macro, meso, and micro level. So the relationship that you're kind of talking about is that the CAPTA policy makes VOA and like particularly the HYRC have to report any child abuse and neglect.
Yeah, and then even if they suspect it as well, that's the big thing. So any suspicion, so it's not that the child needs to identify or tell you, but if they, you know, if you see like bruising, if you see things like them being like, if say if you're like an LCSW and you know that like when kids are abused the way that they'll react, if you suspect that, you have to report it. And so there's the NASW guidelines, but then also like the legislative guidelines through this on how to go about reporting.
Okay.
And so that, oh, sorry.
I was just going to go through the macro, meso, and micro levels, but if you were going to
so what I was going to say is the macro level is, I mean, it would be unlikely, but certainly this could happen. Like if say there was a big incident at VOA, like, and you know, Orrin Hatch or Mike Lee are senators, it really pissed them off. They could theoretically cut the, I think it's 15% of VOA's funding is federal, 15 or 20%. And so they could end that if we're not following through on federal policy. And so that would be kind of the macro level, is that, you know, funding that we do get federally, they could cut off and they could just say that's their reasoning.
Okay. Is that funding like specifically for like any part of VOA, or do you know?
So it goes into different, so like some of it is like through Cornerstone, like where they to pay for like, it's partly through the Violence Against Women Act. Okay. But then some of that is how they get some of their funding to pay for like the DV treatment program. And then YRC does get some federal funding as well. And so they get some county, state, and then some federal. And I think it's like 20% of their budget is federal.
Did VOA exist before this, before CAPTA?
VOA Utah, I don't think did under the original one, because Bruce, go downstairs. He hears cars outside, so he's annoying.
It's okay.
He hears your voice, and so he thinks like someone's here that isn't here, so he's like, where are they?
That's awesome, because Meryl like just doesn't give two craps about like hearing any voices on the phone, on the computer, on TV, nothing. Like only if it's a real live person, or she can hear footsteps coming up the stairs outside.
Oh yeah,
that'll drive her crazy. Yeah.
Sorry.
So yeah,
what was
Utah did not exist before CAPTA was passed.
I can look that up. I think VOA Utah started sometime in the 80s, and I pulled up the original bill was 78, but
Okay.
then so under the modified version where they tied it to McKinney-Vento, VOA would have existed because that was a few years ago.
Okay, so I mean, basically, I'm wondering if like there has been any change to the way that VOA had to conduct things based on this, but I don't
I
know
wouldn't,
change
I
with like
don't think so.
okay,
I think probably because like when they would have started just to get the federal funding, they would have complied with it.
right, okay. So at a meso level, the impact of this.
Because Meso's tricky because it is like a federal bill, so
Right.
it's Congress, and so I mean Meso would be like a different state, like a Utah legislative bill, I would think.
Well, like I think what she means is like how the agency functions at a meso level, like if it impacts how they would interact with other agencies or groups
Oh,
of
okay.
clients, like that kind of thing. I'm thinking is what she's talking about.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, work with like Christmas Box House, which is kind of the state's receiving center for foster kids or runaway youth.
I remember that.
And so that's there's a new youth shelter in Ogden called Youth Futures, and so we work with them. But so yeah, Christmas Box House is through the state, so that would be. But there, yeah, we don't really work with any federal programming. What it would be, yeah, another nonprofit, and then the state agency.
Okay. And then at a micro level, I'm guessing that's just like your actual one-on-one interactions with kids.
Yeah, that would be like I think the reporting if you see it, kind of the due diligence part of reporting that. And then just, having an intake process with kids that like ask that question, and I'm sure like just informing them on if they have been abused, what resources are available to them, because we have to do that.
You have to ask the kids what resources are available to them?
Oh, no, so sorry, we tell the kids. So VOA.
Okay. And that would be like HYRC or like?
Yeah, HYRC or Cornerstone.
Okay. Okay. How has the policy impacted positively or negatively a program or agency? So we kind of touched on this a little bit with the macro, meso, micro level question, I think. Do you think there's anything more to add to that, like how the policies have positively or negatively affected VOA at all?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I don't have any negative. I would say it's probably positive because, I mean, just having something codified through law that can help with that, I'm sure VOA likes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, investigate how federal legislation impacts funding. So you talked about a little bit already, federal funding, but would it affect any funding of like that VOA gets and how they use it, or?
Yeah, like that's why it needs to go to programs that specifically have youth. So, let's see. Like hypothetically, it couldn't go to, say, one of the homeless outreach programs that doesn't work with families or youth, I mean. And then So yeah, it just needs to be tied to specific programs that you can measure where there's youth interaction.
Because of this policy, you're saying?
Well,
Or
yeah, just because the policy would have like anything that the policy says, like we would need to ensure that that's being followed through on. And so say they gave us some money, we couldn't put that into a program that only serves adults.
okay. That makes sense. Would you say that how would the federal legislation impact program regulations and policies? If anything like that we haven't already talked about?
Yeah, I mean, I think did you see the new Youth Resource Center at all?
It was not finished by the time I left, I don't think.
Okay, because they certainly factored in that stuff when they built it. I mean, it's really cool. Like, see if I can find a picture and email it to you. Let me I'll email you a couple pictures really quick. Sorry.
You're good.
Bruce.
But give me attention.
Hey.
Oh my
stop.
God.
Cannot see any area where they show the beds. So never mind. My 30 seconds of Googling. So yeah, the youth shelter part, it's like kind of just like an open area. But they do partitions for, they have to separate the youth because 18 to 22-year-olds can stay there as well.
Okay.
And so they use like partition kind of cubicle wall type things to separate the underage kids to the 18 to 22-year-olds, if that makes sense. And so they built the shelters with that in mind.
What's the youngest age that kids can stay there?
15.
15.
And that's state of Utah law, because there's no federal like they have to be this young or this old for you to help them. They just leave that to the states. And so the state of Utah has decided that it's 15.
Okay.
And so like I think in Washington it's like 12, for example. But they have a lot larger homeless youth problem in Seattle. But yeah, the state legislature for whatever reason said 15. I don't know why, but
yeah,
they liked 15.
So if they're younger than 15, they're just like call their parents?
Well, what I would say, and I've told a fair number of kids this, is when I'm like, how old are you? And they're like 14. And they're like, but I need a place to stay. I'm like, so you're 15, right? Because it goes by client report. And then I tell them, you do need to be 15 to stay there, but it goes by your report and you don't have an ID, so they can't and then so I'm like, what year were you born? And they're like, 95 or whatever it was. And I'm like, so you were born in 94? Or sorry, 93. Wait, sorry. Yeah. So you're a year older. Yeah. Born in. And so a lot of kids do that.
Do you have what's the cutoff age? Like, what if they were 9? Then would you just be like?
I mean, there's a point where it's so visibly obvious that they're not. Yeah. But if they look 15-ish, there's kids that I've probably 13, because some 13-year-olds could pass for 15.
But if they couldn't get in there, then they would have to you would have to tell them to go home.
Well, they would have to go to the Christmas box house. So that's the only other one, because that's the state's one. And so if they're younger, the state says that they have to go there. But again, we would just say, oh, well, the client reported that they were 15.
Are they trying to find their parents? during this time?
A lot of times they try to. It's not always super successful. So like sometimes they do find them, or like, you know, they were already in the foster care system and they ran away and they're running away from foster parents. But one thing that happens a lot in Utah, so like I just did a presentation on this. So nationally, the homeless youth rate for LGBTQ kids is 40%, but in Utah it's 60 to 65%.
Oh
And
man, I
so
know. Yeah.
what that means is like parents, they come out to their parents, or their parents find out that they're LGBTQ, and then their parents kick them out, and that's 100% correlated to Mormonism.
Yeah. You
There's
just did a
no,
presentation on this?
what's that?
You just did a presentation on this?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So I don't say it exactly like that, the last bit,
Yeah.
but between
It's
you and I.
Mormonism.
Yeah. I say something like, you know, the dominant religion has some influence on that number, is I think how I say it, but because that's a little more PC. But you know, people get really mad. Some people get mad when they see that because they disagree with it. But
Yeah, I just went to a presentation like a couple weeks ago here that was like the same thing. It was about foster kids transitioning out and like homeless youth and stuff like that, and the LGBTQ, and how the Tennessee religion like plays into that as well.
mm,
Some people definitely got irritated in this. Like even though it was like a room full of social workers for the most part,
yeah,
there's still some people who are like, that doesn't happen. And
yeah,
but yeah, it does. But,
yeah.
wow, 60 to 65%. That is a lot.
Hmm.
Gosh.
And so yeah, the national rate is 40% average, so we're way higher.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. All right. How would CAPTA impact VOA data reporting at all? I don't know if that would be like with HIMIS, or if there's like another way.
Yeah, it would be, so we use two software programs. So one of them is we put it in HIMIS, and then there's a VOA one called MAUD, MAUD. It's an acronym, but it's after the founder. Her first name was Maud, and her husband started VOA. So it's like, I can't remember what the acronym is, but so we put it in there. And then, yeah, for it, just if they're under 18 in HIMIS, it just does kind of a generic like profile, but it doesn't say what services they got because they are under 18, and it protects that information. Okay. And in MAUD, that's where we record all the services, and that's only internal to VOA, and it's because of state and federal policies. So like this bill.
Okay. Does CAPTA have anything to do with that at all, or like affect any?
Yeah, I'm sure it's that and a couple other bills as far as I understand. So there's quite a few. I think it's also like, you know, oh my God, what is it? The medical one too. Oh my God, I can't remember this. It's like where you can't, like demographic stuff about protected classes, you can't associate it to a person. So yeah, there's a few though.
Like HIPAA?
Yeah, that's it, HIPAA.
Okay.
So there's a few like that VOA complies with too.
Okay. Does VOA report child abuse at all?
Yeah.
On systems?
On the system?
Data, like as in data, like how many, I don't know.
We just report that we made like a referral and contacted DCFS, and that's it. And then we do specific incident reports, but those are just internal to the agency. But because of like federal and state guidelines, which I'm sure a lot originate from this bill, into that we can't, if it's a minor, we can't put their name in a report.
Okay. So the federal government doesn't get like how many people we refer to DFS, DCFS? That's just like
No, they just get they don't get their demographics. They just get statistics. So how many people? They don't get like specific names or ages or birthdays.
okay. Okay. And then delivery of services, how the federal legislation impacts delivery of services. Trying to think if there'd be anything that we didn't talk about yet with that.
I mean, let me read this thing a little more. I mean, the only thing I could really think of is just in like policies and procedures that we do for underage youth that we serve. But I think on a day-to-day basis, just kind of the stuff we've already talked about, like just, you know, the reporting, any child abuse stuff, like that's not optional, it's mandatory.
Mm-hmm. When you say policy, it affects policies and procedures, what were you talking about? Or what
for VOA, like, you know, like, just in like the VOA handbook, you know, if you're a new employee, the stuff you have to read in a specific thing, like here's what you do if a minor comes in and blah blah blah.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yes, don't have that anymore. So it would mention something like in VOA handbook for policies and procedures about like reporting.
Yeah.
Discuss reforms within the policy that have impacted the program's functioning. So the McKinney-Vento would have been like a reform?
Yeah. And that's something I probably couldn't, I would need to read a little more about the bill.
Okay.
I could do that another day and let you know. But that'd take a little bit of time.
Okay.
When's this due again?
This isn't due until like December 4th.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's like a practically almost a month from now.
Yeah, I could look at the bill and just look at all the, because I'm pretty good at reading that type of stuff, so I could look at that if you're interested.
Okay. And then do you have any recommendations of ways that reforms might enhance program and service delivery for VOA? So like, is there any way that you would change CAPTA policy at all to make it better?
That's where I would want to, if I could answer that one in a little bit too, where I'd want to read a little more about all the bill at length. And I certainly could give you my 2 cents on it.
I know. I was like, this one is what he's probably going to have the most to say about. Because you always had a lot of like, you would always talk a lot about like how policy could be better, or like ways of like just how people could be helped more based on policy.
Yeah. No, so I'm always interested in that. I could give you a better answer after I read more of the bill, because I just pulled up the website through U.S. Health and Human Services, and there's what's called like the executive brief. That's 3 pages. And so that's, what's that?
I could send you like a very short thing that it was like Gateway Welfare Facts or something like that. Child Welfare Facts. Does that sound familiar at all?
Yeah, I would want to pull up the ways they've amended the bill, Congress,
Oh,
and so that's what I would do.
okay. Fact sheet. Child Welfare Gateway fact sheet. I don't
So
know.
I pulled up where it is on all the bill text, but it's long and it would take a bit to read. So I mean, what probably I want to read it more, and I could get back to you, like, if it's cool, probably sometime later next week,
Yeah, that's fine.
because I'm going on vacation this weekend. But
Where are you going?
Seattle. Speaking of Seattle,
That's awesome. Okay, I just sent you something
but yeah,
too.
slight spoiler, my guess is just probably enforcement. And almost always like funding. Like, I think just the nature of recent government oversight, because Republicans have controlled Congress for the majority of the past 30 years, that they don't typically fund programs as much as they should. And they don't like as strong of oversight as they do on other programs for programs like this, would probably be from what I can skim so far on the bill.
I'm thinking it's the CAPTA Reauthorization Act of 2010, because I found that so far. And that says that the state has to note any changes in how they're using grant funds, notify of any changes related to child abuse prevention that might affect the state's eligibility for the grant program. So yeah, funding would be a lot of it. And then it also says that the Secretary of HHS to complete studies and reports to Congress on a bunch of stuff, shaken baby syndrome, a lot of different stuff.
Yeah, I just emailed you you have a version of what you emailed was something I was looking up too.
Oh.
And then they have the link to they say the full bill text can be at Cornell Law School's thing. And then, yeah, they have some links on there, and I just emailed you one of them.
Okay, cool.
I like how Cornell does it's pretty easy if you click on that Cornell thing. And that's usually how you read it. But yeah, just because monitoring and oversight is pretty small. Yeah, and kind of what you're just reading. It's just like the secretary, so that'd be Secretary of Health and Human Services, shall include monitoring of state policies and procedures required under clauses 2 and 3 of section 5016. So yeah, and then you need to go to that. And then just ensuring that the state complies. So for example, they're doing kind of the carrot approach is what it's called in policy, like where you're trying to incentivize states to follow the law, but you leave the enforcement mostly up to them. And so like what the carrot means is like funding, but it's also a softer approach. But like with some policies, like Congress creates like government departments specifically to oversee that. So for example, like the Financial Protection Bureau is to monitor big banks and like credit card institutions to make sure that they can't defraud people again and cause another recession. And they just gave like literally $1 billion fine to Wells Fargo over all the shit they did.
Oh, wow.
And so that's like the stick approach. So you have the carrot and the stick. And so it's like something like this. I mean, the federal government certainly has the funding and the power to do something like that, just to set like an agency daily that all they're doing is like enforcing this throughout the country. And like think of the IRS, that's what it is for taxes, you know. But, you know, they feel that just throwing it into another federal agency like Health and Human Services was the best thing. It's not that Health and Human Services is bad. It's just that, you could argue should funding and enforcement increase would probably be my 2 cents thus far. But I'd want to read more about it, and I could probably give you a more detailed answer.
Yeah, increase in funding is always a good answer.
Yeah. But I think enforcement, and then just like, I guess it's probably quarterly that the secretary has to report to Congress, and it's like, is that adequate? Should it be more often? And then, you could say Congress could get a subcommittee, which is a specialized committee just to deal with this. And then how often is that subcommittee meeting?
So the secretary of HHS is who has to do the reporting?
Yeah.
And how do they find out about what VOA is doing?
So they're given a report. So the state of Utah would then compile a report from all the agencies that they and then so VOA would compile a report. It would go to the state and to HHS, but they probably the staff at HHS would then lump all the reports together and look for any glaring anything big in there, and then they're just going to look at the big stuff.
Okay. And
so that's one of the things that minor problems when you're talking Congress and congressional committees, they're super important. It's just they matter and they have a lot of power, but there's just so much going on in the world and the country that they're when, I'm just going to throw out, say Connecticut had a bunch of kind of moderate problems that might not raise the red flag enough to Congress that they might just say, oh, state, you go deal with this. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because, those senators and representatives have a lot on their plates. And so that'd be my answer thus far, but I can give you a better one shortly.
Okay. It's not due for a month, so.
And you are not a procrastinator.
Well, I don't know about that. It kind of depends. Just because I'm doing this part of the assignment now does not mean I will not be writing the paper the weekend before it's due.
Yeah, you're not procrastinating. That's good. So props.
Yeah.
I literally write almost all my papers the night before it's due, so whatever.
You'd write a whole paper the night before it was due, even if it was a 10-pager?
Pretty much, yeah.
Oh, no, I couldn't do that.
It's not, I wouldn't recommend it, and I've only slightly started to stop doing it, but I still do it a lot.
I mean, I could see how you could do that pretty easily probably, but for me, it takes me too long to think, process, edit, all that kind of stuff. I don't get a good first draft. There's too much organization that has to happen later.
That's good you know yourself.
Yeah.
Hey, buddy.
Would you say that VOA would advocate for support or change for this legislation at all, or would you no?
I would say yes in principle, but side note, one thing that bugs me about VOA, and this is between us, they don't, I mean, you could put this in the paper, I guess, but VOA doesn't really lobby for any legislation in the state, but especially at the federal level. And so they've been really afraid and timid to. And there are other nonprofits and community partners of ours that do. VOA is just very reluctant to, because they're worried that they'll make a legislator mad. And
even though having Sandra on VOA staff doesn't help at all.
Well, so Sandra left the agency a little bit ago.
Oh, she did?
Yeah, so she's working for the Salt Lake City government now. So she works for Salt Lake City in the government and then is a state legislator too.
What does she do in the government?
So they started a new position of homeless services coordinator for the city, and so she just left for that.
Sounds like a good job.
Yeah. but prior to that, I was talking to her for a while, and she was trying to get VOA more interested, but they were really reluctant just because. So they'll like throw their name on to like, so a community action program does a lot of lobbying, and then they just kind of throw on like on specific things with CAP, like VOA supports this too, and that's about it. But they don't really go up there or have anyone that goes up on specific bills to say, hey, we really want these 5 bills and here's why.
Okay.
So
VOA
yeah,
doesn't really get in the spotlight very much, and like you think they would support it in spirit, but they're not gonna do much.
they might like throw their name behind it and say VOA supports this policy, but they're not going to go lobby for it.
Okay. How does the legislation impact VOA's collaboration with other agencies in the community? And we kind of already talked about this a little bit.
Yeah, just with there aren't a ton of agencies that work with minors, and so there's like one in Ogden, the Youth Futures, and then in Salt Lake, Christmas Box House, and so those are kind of the main ones. There's also an emergency child care day care center, so I would say theoretically with them too, because we sometimes get referrals from them. But yeah, so there's and it's usually them calling us rather than the other way around. We've occasionally used the emergency childcare because it's 72 hours of like no questions asked. A parent can come and drop off baby or infant or child.
Yeah.
To like, so that they don't like abuse them because they're so stressed and it's at wit's end.
Yeah.
So we've referred a couple people to there, but it's usually once people have hit that 72 hours and they don't have a place to go or need help with stuff that they call us and they're like, hey, VOA, what can you do?
Yeah, I remember I referred somebody there, one person.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to move to a new state and learn all the resources like from zero.
Yeah.
And then like coming here to Tennessee, I would like expect there to be something because they had it in Salt Lake, but there's not.
Yeah.
So it just like really varies. But that way you can see where needs are met in some places and then not in others. And it brings awareness a little
Yeah.
bit. But
you can start those nonprofits there if you
I
stay
know.
after.
I know. Does the legislation encourage or discourage collaboration?
I would say encourage with those small number of agencies that like Christmas Box House and
Okay. And then do you have, I know I wrote about one in my last paper, but can you think of a specific family that was impacted by this legislation, ways that the family's outcomes might have been different had reforms not been in place? And do you think that the family was aware of the role that the legislation played in their receipt of services?
I mean, there's a family probably like 6 months ago that I had to report, and they were from Burma or Myanmar, like same country, but the government tried to change the name of the country. It's interesting. So, but yeah, Burma. So they're from there, and there was 2 14-year-old girls, and then they had come into the library and identified that. So they spoke English pretty fluently because they had kind of gone through the school system here.
Mm-hmm.
Since they came over when they were about 8, and so they were pretty fluent in English by now. But their parents knew very little. But their parents were, both mom and dad were pretty physically and emotionally abusive. But what happened is we ended up contacting DCFS and the police, and then what happened is there was kind of an initial, like, I don't know what you would call it, but an initial freak out that happened the next day because their parents came down to the library because they found out that they were down there, but then the police were there too, and then DCFS came down. And then it was like they basically, DCFS had asked the parents, like in a separate area away from the kids, like, what's going on? And they're like, well, yeah, we hit them when they don't listen, and they never listen. So like they're basically just admitting, yeah, we hit them a lot, but it was more of a cultural thing, I'd say. Not to say that excuses it, but like to them in their country and their culture, that's what you did when kids acted up.
Yeah.
And then, but it's not good.
Yeah.
And obviously that's why here we have laws against it. But to them, the parents had no idea that like it was bad. But however, the girls going through the US education system and having friends in school are like, hey, this isn't cool. Adults shouldn't be hitting us.
Yeah.
And so it was, what I would say is like the parents had to be informed that there were laws basically that they couldn't do that. And so I would say initially the parents weren't aware of any policies, but they were informed that there were several like state and federal laws that prevented them from doing this. But then also DCFS was working with them for a few months on just like doing home visits. So they didn't like charge the parents with anything, but it was like they agreed to case management.
Okay.
And home visits. So DCFS went and like a couple times a week would go and do like parenting classes with the parents.
DCFS would actually do those classes?
Yeah, so one of their staff would go and then just like, yeah, just technically wasn't a class, but would do like home visits and talk to them. And just go through like a program of like, hey, here's how you should interact with your kids. And then in the end, it's probably one of the happier ones in the end because the parents actually came in a while later and were like, we had no idea. We're sorry we caused this confusion. And they were worried because their kids ran away and they were worried about them. But they just thought it was, oh, sorry?
You came into contact with those kids because they had run away?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, because their kids had like learned through like socialization that it wasn't okay what their parents were doing, so they ran away?
Exactly.
Wow. Okay. What did the police do in that situation? Like you had police collaborating with you and
so it was like a big like 3-day thing kind of at the library overall. So like the police were involved the first and second days just with the initial report that I had to report. But then the police were there on the second day when mom and dad found out that the kids were at the library. And then they were just kind of there, I guess, just waiting to see what DCFS would do, and then just kind of keeping the parents away from the kids. Because they were kind of freaking out and like, you need to come home now, and yelling at the kids in Burmese.
Yeah.
And so like, Bruce, go lay down. So yeah, it was just like them trying to keep everyone chill.
Yeah. Were the kids, did they end up staying at the HYRC?
They went to Christmas Box House for a few nights.
Oh, okay.
And so
then after that they went home?
So it was they had stayed at Christmas Box House for like 3 nights. But then would come into the library during the day. And then, I mean, there's a lot of interactions where, where kids just run away because they're being abused and then go to YRC. And then YRC has to contact DCFS and make a contact to inform the parents that their kids are there, but they don't need to like reunite them or anything.
You said HYRC has to do that?
Yeah, if kids that are under age 18. So
Okay.
That's normally what happens, but this story had a little happier ending, I suppose.
Yeah. It sounds like it.
Yeah.
That's a cool story, though. Was it a librarian who like connected them to VOA, or did they like go up to the desk or like?
Yeah, it was the teen librarian. Saw
Okay.
they were at one of the computers trying.
Oh, okay. Um, would you know anything about um how other agencies would experience the policy in comparison to VOA?
How other states say that
Other
again? Sorry.
agencies, how other agencies would experience the policy as compared to VOA?
Um, I don't.
I think it would. I know. I don't know how I'm supposed to find that out. If a lot of it's due to like funding, how would you know what other agencies federal funding is or their
Yeah,
oversight and stuff like that?
I would say there's probably some correlation because if it's federal law, like any agency in the country would need to comply with it.
Yeah.
But it could determine like different funding levels. But in that way, I would just say yeah, just because they would still need to comply with it.
Okay. So that's like all the questions that I have on this sheet. I might like want to do some more reading of the specific policy and the reforms and like ask you some more specific questions in the future.
Okay.
So we have like a month
Yeah, I can
on.
like later next week. I can read the bill and then answer those couple questions.
Okay. Yeah, there's not really a rush. So, but
All
yeah.
right.
Thank you.
Heck yeah. How's school going?
It's going good. I'm like so ready to graduate.
Yeah.
But I mean, UT is like some of my classes are like really great, and then some of my classes are just like I paid for that crap. Like, ugh.
Mm-hmm.
It's like completely variable what kind of education I'm gonna get in a class. But my
Yeah.
teacher who's teaching this class that I'm doing this paper for, she's like really good.
Mm,
And so I've enjoyed it a lot. But they're
that's
not
good.
all.
Do you have
Yeah.
multiple classes? Like, what's your schedule?
I have this child and adolescent development and policy class. I have um, practice with adult individuals where we're learning like CBT, motivational interviewing, and behavioral activation.
Mm-hmm.
And I have another class which is practice with groups. And then I have my field internship, which is 3 days a week.
Okay. Nice. I just have class Fridays, evenings, like, and then Saturdays, like every other weekend. So
Do
it's
you have
Saturday
class
from,
Fridays and Saturdays?
yeah.
Oh
And
wow.
every other Saturday, it's like 8 to 5.
Oh wow, that's a lot.
And then we just do homework like online during the week.
Okay. Are you is your classes are they online?
No, so like we do just like our homework and readings throughout the week and submit papers online, and then they like sometimes record. Not always. I would probably say like 20% of it is online. It's like a hybrid program, so it's an executive program is what it's called. But like so like we have class, and that's where we get the lion's share of what we're learning and doing. Um, but like they sometimes record extra videos of lectures that they had for us to watch, like just while we're at home. And then, but yeah, like we still have class at school. So like on the Friday evenings from like 5 to 8:30, and then Saturdays from 8 to 5.
Yeah, that's kind of nice. I think I would like, I mean, it would depend on the professor, but like sometimes I like online stuff because it's more flexible to doing it when you want.
Yeah, the homework's nice, and that we don't have to go to the university like every day, or is nice.
Yeah. We
And
do
I don't.
that too. Like we turn in our stuff at random times online.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's mostly in class stuff though, with a little bit of online stuff.
Yeah. That sounds good. And
Yeah.
you graduate when?
So I'll be done this summer,
Oh my gosh. And then what are you gonna do?
and then I'm gonna implement martial law and take over the country. Um, and then I want to look for a policy job,
Yeah.
and just like I want to work on policy, and then my plan is for a few to do that for just a few years here, and then a few years move to like California.
Is
Um,
Jamie on board with that?
what's that?
Is Jamie on board with moving to California?
Yeah, she is.
Oh, good.
And then like kind of the Bay Area, but
Hmm.
actually there's a lot of government jobs there and a lot of like democratic policy jobs, and that's what I really want to do. Just because that area is so big on policy, and there's so much like federal government and state government and city government stuff there, and so many like democratic office holders that it's pretty
Yeah.
easy to find policy to work on.
Well,
So that's what I really
you've always belonged in California, so.
yeah. I'm giving up on Utah.
Oh, your dog doesn't seem happy about that.
Bruce, oh, he's coming. Bruce, shut up.
Hi. Oh.
Bruce. So stop barking. Bruce, go lay down. Sorry.
No, you're good.
So that'll come. Bruce, go lay down. Go to your bed. Go. What about you? What are
I
you doing?
mean, I don't know what I'm gonna do after I graduate. I honestly really have no idea. So I'm keeping my options open. I'm probably gonna apply to a ton of different jobs across the country and just take whichever one ends up sounding the best that will like potentially help pay back my loans
Mm,
and potentially offer supervision. So
nice.
I have no idea though.
Do you care what state you're in?
Yes.
Do you want
I
to
have
stay
like
up
a
there?
no, I have like an ongoing list of like cities where I'm like researching different places and trying to figure out like where I'd be the happiest living.
Mm, like
And
Branson, Missouri.
don't know anything about that city.
It's pretty awesome. I'm joking.
Okay, I was like, what?
No, it's just like it's a big like country town, and they have a
What,
lot.
Missouri?
Branson, Missouri.
Yeah, I've never heard of that.
So
No.
it's like Wendover or something.
Wendover?
Yeah, did you ever go there in Nevada?
Mm,
It's the
I
one
don't.
that's like 2 hours west of Salt Lake, just on the Nevada border. So it's this just gambling town that's really trashy. So people in Utah go there all the time.
To like go gamble and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know of it, but no, I've never been there. I would just like meet people like trying to catch a bus to go
Yeah.
there. But
Don't
no,
don't go there.
no, I'm not gonna go there.
But what cities?
Um, I know like definitely like Washington and Oregon are still like places. Cities, I don't know, like Eugene maybe,
Mm-hmm.
Portland. I wrote down some cities in Washington, but I haven't been to all of them. One of them is like northeast kinda,
Mm.
but it seemed like it'd be really too cold. I just don't know. And I kind of like Salt Lake, but I don't at the same time I don't know if I could do that.
Mm.
I don't know. But out west, liberal, people who recycle, and then close to mountains. So I'm just looking for like an outdoor adventure place that's not like a huge city with like lots of traffic, or maybe I could live in like a nice suburb
Mm,
outside, but still has like cool stuff around it, but definitely liberal. So other than that, like I don't know
like
yet.
Nebraska.
No.
Oh, I'm just sorry. Yeah, no, anywhere on the West Coast is good.
Um, where somewhere in, I know Montana's a very red state, but um, I've never been to Missoula, but I know it's like kind of a blue city in the midst of the red that might be cool. I've just never been there.
Yeah, I had some friends that went to school in Missoula and in Billings, and those are really liberal cities there, and they really liked it.
Yeah, I've heard good things. So like there's places that I just need to like go travel and like check
Hmm.
them out and do
Yeah,
research and stuff.
Debbie, do you remember Debbie at the library?
Yeah.
She lived up in a few years in Missoula,
Oh,
and so she liked it. And then one of my good buddies did his undergrad there, and so yeah, it's a really liberal city, and so I've heard good things.
yeah, it's on my list.
Nice.
That and a lot of other places. Maybe it was Bellingham, Washington. I don't know.
Let me look
Yeah.
that.
I have like a list somewhere where I've written this all down, but and I've like started to write down like different statistics about them, like their population, census, and how they tend to vote, and I don't know what else.
It's north of Seattle. I think I've been there once.
Do you remember anything about it?
It was pretty. Yeah, last time I was in Washington State was when I was like 12, so that's kind of why I wanted to go back. We're just going to Seattle, but because we drove up to Vancouver, and so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the freeway cuts through there.
So you're just going to Seattle for like the weekend?
So we'll be there for like 5 days.
Oh, okay. And you're driving?
No, we're flying.
You're flying? And you're just gonna like tour the city and like do you have any specific like thing you're doing there or
I mean, just hanging out, just seeing the site stuff, going to some of the museums.
they have really good Indian food there, like
Oh,
really
nice.
good Indian restaurants.
I'll need to look some up.
It's been too long since I've been there, so I don't remember like the names of any of them. But maybe like India Oven, I don't know if I made
Yeah,
that up or not, but like really good Indian restaurants.
yeah.
Yeah. But I liked Seattle. I think it's just like kind of too big for me to want to live there.
Mm.
But
Yeah, I just want to be in a big city, and because that's where all the big problems are.
yeah, yeah, that's true.
But I
I
like
mean,
it.
I need what?
Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say I need problems too for like my job, but I can find probably problems anywhere
Yeah,
for what I need to do.
small cities always have like drug problems and domestic violence problems and stuff.
The fun stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really hard to deal with, but good and needed.
Yeah.
And then, but like, yeah, if I want to live to the Bay Area, I need to be cool with a lot of people, which I am.
Yeah. I mean, that'd be a really cool place to live. I'll come
Yeah,
out and visit.
nice. You
But
could, it
yeah.
would be cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I'll text you sometime when I get back about sometime in like a weekish or so, if that
Okay.
works for you.
Yeah, yeah. Again, like no rush. I'm not planning on writing this anytime soon. And I will at some point maybe like read through the policy more and like email you some questions or something like that if
Okay, cool.
I have any. But
Yeah, maybe not this weekend, but the following weekend after
yeah, yeah,
I have
no, it
class.
won't. Yeah, I'll wait.
Cool.
Once you have a great trip.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks. Good talking to you though.
Yeah, you too, Ethan. It was great
Cool.
to catch up.
Heck yeah. Bring the ruckus.
You're hilarious. Okay. We'll see you later.
See ya.
Bye.